computer audio. There we go. Okay. That's going to be bad if it doesn't. Hey, Starbucks people, how was Waikele Starbucks? Was it busy or not busy? Or did you not work?
I didn't work today, but normally we're very slow during weekdays.
I would imagine so.
We're only ever busy.
And what about Al Moana? You guys are making fun of Waikele. Oh wait, no, Waikele has mad respect for Al Moana, right? That's what it was? Or wait, there's two. Aren't there two Starbucks at Al Moana?
Yeah, 5 Starbucks. 3 of them are closed.
Do they like move? Oh, that's right, because there's the one in the Target, right?
Target, there's Marginal, there's Evelyn, there's Macy's,
Do you get like moved to different ones, or are you like each employee kind of belongs to their?
Each employee belongs to theirs, but we lend people out to them.
Which one did you get stuck with?
I'm the store manager.
Well, that's kind of nice. You could see the hula dancers, right?
Absolutely
No, that's true. You probably get really tired of that. Yeah. I can do that. Okay, well then your job, I guess, is more stressful. You have to be the big manager. Okay, so these are the 3 steps that I was just reiterating here. We have our preferences, which we are going to understand with our indifference curve. Again, largely somewhat of a review, I'm hoping, from the principles, but I will repeat myself here. The preferences, as we are going to see here today, again, are revealed to us by indifference curves. The reason why they're called indifference curves is that what you are posed with is if you want to have a certain amount of happiness, which economists are going to understand as utility, if you want a certain amount of happiness, what kind of combination of 2 different goods are you going to need to be equally happy with some other combination of 2 goods? Thus, indifference, right? That I don't care which one I get, right? Does it take 3 medium point pens to make me equally happy as 10 fine point pens, right? Because I just kind of told you I like medium point more than fine point. So it's obviously going to take a lot, right? If we were looking at combinations of goods, it might be one where it's going to lean where I don't need as many medium points and a whole bunch of fine points to be equally happy with just having a few more medium point pens. This is just reflecting what I want versus what can I actually afford. Because again, the demand curve is, to remind ourselves here, is both my willingness and ability, right, to buy the goods. Not picking on Starbucks, but dude, I don't go there. I could afford to go there. I mean, there's probably a time in my life when I could have afforded to go there, but I don't go there because 1, I don't like the people that hang out there, and 2, I don't drink that much coffee as it is. So there's not really a lot of reason for me to go there. But I can afford to go there. On the other hand, my wife asked me to go to the Signature Steakhouse on Friday, the one that's at the Al Moana Hotel. Seems like super fancy because she got this like gift card for $50. I looked at the menu. Guess how much an appetizer cost at the Signature Steakhouse? Oh, $50. Yeah. So I'm like, dude, why are we doing like this? Just seems like a scam. Like, like free whipped cream on your coffee just to make you buy the coffee, or in this case, free appetizer to get by this big old freaking catch of the day or something. I'm not saying I'm poor, but dude, I don't need a Signature Steakhouse all the time. Put the 2 together though, and that's where we get our consumer choice. So consumer choice is reflected by my actual demand curve. So this is obviously important for us as this slide says, it is our workhorse here, because everything about microeconomics, which this is intermediate microeconomics, everything about microeconomics is to some level about what do people want and what are people willing to pay for it. I mean, that is the magic. Those are the magic items to know about, right? Because if you don't know those things, you're not going to know what prices are charged, and you're not going to know why people are buying things or not buying things. So these are our 3 steps. So we start with baskets of goods, meaning that instead of looking at this in terms of X, Y this way, what we do is we look at them where right, that I could look at quantity of coffee and quantity of Skittles. Now I like Skittles. I like coffee, all right. It's not that I'm allergic to it or would die from drinking it, right? Which will actually create for us a different kind of indifference curve, right? There are people who are revolted by the smell of it. There are people like, yeah, I don't drink it socially, but I'm not like going to town on it, right? And then we know that there are addicts to it, right? And all 3 of these individuals can be represented here, just like with Skittles, right? I asked a student today in class this morning if he ate Skittles, and he's like, I eat candy. Like, are you kidding me? Like, the reaction should be more inspired. I love Skittles, right? I mean, I don't get the sense he likes Skittles that much if you're not that inspired. Anyway, I've kind of told you, I like Skittles. Coffee's all right. Now, that kind of indifference curve is going to have a particular shape. Let's start off with this. Let's say that I equally like the 2 goods. Then it's going to look like this. Now, this is not a demand curve. It's not a demand curve because on the demand curve, it's the price of a good and the quantity of the same good. So this would be like the price and quantity of Skittles itself. This is just saying, if I made you 100 units of happiness, and for this, economists use a term called utility to describe the happiness. That if you wanted 100 units of happiness, of utility, again, it's somewhat of a fictional term, that I would be happy, in this case, having 10 pounds of Skittles or 6 coffees, or giving me 5 pounds of Skittles, let's say, and 10 coffees. I'm making up the numbers here, but it gives you an idea that, right, if one's got less of something, the other one has to have more of something to make you equally happy. How much more it has all depends on your preferences. Here I said they're kind of more or less equal, right? So it's almost, I made it so that's not exactly a 1-for-1 trade-off, but it's kind of sort of a 1-for-1. Now, I kind of told you one where quantity of Skittles, quantity of coffee is one where can be a little bit more, I'm trying to make this a little bit more flatter, which would mean that, right, I could give up a lot of coffee, and if I only got a little bit more Skittles, I'd be equally happy. Which is kind of saying I really like Skittles a lot, right? Because I'm willing to sacrifice half of my consumption of coffee to get just an incremental increase in Skittles, right? Or I could make it the other way too, right? I mean, and who do I think was vegetarian in this class? Let me try to guess. Is there? Well, I know Jacob's you just seem very carnivorous. You seem very carnivorous. Are you very carnivorous? Jacob, very, very carnivorous. Okay. No, I'm just here. I should have looked at the Signature Steakhouse to see if anyone revolted. No, I don't think there is. Is there? I don't think there is. Is there a vegetarian in the class? Probably that's a lot to ask. I'm just curious. But I don't know. He probably not. I don't know. It's not I'm trying to single anyone out, although I probably don't. Hey, Jacob, why don't you be a vegetarian here? Or no, actually, you're gonna be anti-Skittle. Anti-Skittle. So, in this case, if he's anti-Skittle, what it's gonna mean here is that it doesn't matter whether he has no Skittles or a lot. The only thing that's going to be driving up his utility is having more coffee, which would mean that he would have vertical indifference curves. What did you drink at the club when you went to the club with your boyfriend? What did you drink? Yeah, what did you drink at the club when you went to the club? Yeah, it doesn't matter. Did you drink the same thing?
Oh, I had like 3 options.
Okay, did you drink so much that you threw up?
No.
Did your boyfriend drink so much that he threw up? Oh, that's probably good. That's a great, just like a DD, and you don't even have to worry about it. That's fantastic. I'm not advocating drinking. I don't care what you do. Now, if we pick these two tips, these two, if it offends you that I'm writing this, change it to butterfly wings and clouds. But it's harder to, I mean, when you think of the histories of people throwing up after drinking, more likely than not, most of the time, it's most of the time related to beer more than it is to vodka, most of the time, right? Now, what that means, right? But people like it because, right? Why do people like beer over vodka? Because it's not as harsh, right? It's not as like intense. This little glass, you have like a big beer, you get to sit and talk, it fills up the time, right? I mean, I know all the, but the problem with beer, right, is that of the alcohols, it's the one you're probably most likely to vomit, which would mean fantastic, right? That I'm happy. Actually, but bends backwards because at some point you're actually thrown up, right? And then you actually would have preferred to drink more vodka, right? But then you have to explore liquor, right? So in this case, you should drink the liquor first, and then. But this could also describe eating contest. Eating contest, right? So every birthday, right? So I am now turning 42 years old this year. 42 years old. Yeah, so 40. Okay, so ever since I was 16, I've eaten a piece of sushi for the number of years I am that year. I don't buy good stuff. I just go to the grocery store. But in the mainland, you can only get it at like specialty grocery stores, the sushi. Here you can get it anywhere, which is nice because here I just go to 7-Eleven and I get the platter, which is it tastes, trust me, compared to the mainland, it tastes much better. It's all relative, right? I mean, it's so much better. But I sit in the parking lot. The way I have to do this is I sit by myself. I sit in the parking lot, 2-liter of Sprite, and I just go to town on the tray. As long as it takes, I'm just eating the sushi and right one for every year. Now, things were pretty good in the teens, the 20s, even the early 30s. When I turned 36, Jordan Bowman, my bromance, he and I decided to mix it with wasabi, and that was not good. Like, you shouldn't be mixing spice. But the reason why I say this is because you can imagine what's starting to happen now is dry heaves, right? In the later, when you get to the upper 30s, early 40s. So, right, I am approaching the backward bending part of this. Now, the only things that are useful about this are the tradition, I guess, is really the only thing, which really isn't playing a role. Well, I guess
or when you start?
I don't know.
Like you split it out like multiple days.
No, you can't do that either. It has to be on June 5th. And I have to start eating them at 7:36 a.m. the time I was born. I mean, that's how it has to happen. It's the way, it's what I've always done.
Finish it in like that one sitting.
What if you come back later?
No, I have to sit in the parking lot until I'm done. What?
I just eat it throughout the day.
No, you gotta sit, eat it at once, starting at 7:36 a.m. You sit in the parking lot, 2-liter of Sprite, platter.
I usually gonna have.
I didn't know, let me be honest, when I started it at 16, I did not think I was gonna be doing it to this day. I obviously, spread it out over the day. Maybe not start at 7:36 a.m. because that's actually a little early to be going to town on it too. Yeah.
Have you found smaller pieces of sushi?
No, and actually the bad thing is that I've noticed that the pieces of sushi here are actually larger. Well, there's more rice involved, which is actually more filling, which is exactly what you don't want. No, that's good. But yeah, and it's also good that I'm not really sure what to do. But no, I am sure what to do. I will say this. The one thing I have thought about is that the advantage of having kids is that you teach them your mistakes, right? And obviously, right, eat it throughout the day, find small pieces. Yeah.
What kind of fish do you order?
Oh, I do the ahi tuna, the spicy ahi tuna, and then I do the what was the other one? And I thought one time I was gonna mix it up and do like California, but I just now stick with tuna, just simple tuna. I'm trying to watch the YouTube videos that train you how to eat competitively. I'm trying to learn some lessons from that to get me to the 50s, and then figure it out. I don't know. That's kind of it. So we see these different baskets. These are different baskets, and you could imagine them looking something like this again, where you see that there's one basket that has little food, a little bit more clothing, and then the other one that has less food, more clothing, and you see these more food than clothing, and that just reflects the result for the same person, and just reflecting what their internal trade-off is at any single moment in time. Yeah.
So sorry.
No, go on.
My pre-con did not cover what the indifference curve.
Yeah. So the indifference curve here. Let's do that here.
Would these be points on the curve then?
Yeah. So let's go with this. So let's go back to, let's do this one, food and clothing. So the indifference curve would be the this is going to be then our combination of baskets of goods so technically speaking, economists do not believe in happiness. We believe in what's called satisfaction, which is quite different. Philosophically speaking, it's different. It's different enough that you feel equally satisfied, an equal existential state of satisfaction, which would mean here, if we do quantity of clothing, quantity of food, right, and then we just say me, that, and this is only for a single individual, then we're saying that there's market basket A where it's 20 units of food, 20 units of food, and 30 units of clothing, and that bundle B is 10 units of food, 50 units of clothing, et cetera, et cetera. Does that help?
And then just draw a line.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that you would then, after the fact, you would draw this line, right, exactly. And then you would have all these points.
And then the one with the
But that they're typical, but here's something to say. I already kind of knew how it was going to be shaped because typically they are shaped like this. and we'll talk about why they're typically shaped like this, but typically they look like this less often. Well, and so these still are aligned with that. But I'm not saying you vegetarians are weird, you secret vegetarians in this class, but I think we would agree that it's outside of the norm where we say that I really don't want that. Now, right, there are other things that we could probably imagine some big, bad, scary disease like botulism. How much botulism do you want, right? None, right? So then if it was botulism versus feeling elated, right? Then, right, we'll pick being happy over some prehistoric disease, right? So so it's possible that they could look odd like this, or in the case of beer, where you consume too much and it's backwards bending. But most of the time, it's going to be curvilinear towards the origin. Most of the time.
And then the one that are vertical,
Yeah.
like just if that person who has that curve, it's like, oh, I'm gonna drink more coffee that day. It's the entire shift towards the side. And say, oh yeah, I want 2 coffees, like great Skittles. Today I'm gonna drink 3 coffees.
So yeah, it would be a shift to the right.
It always shifts.
Yeah,
the
but
other movement along the curve.
no. Well, there's no movement along the curve because what we'd be saying is you've got 2 coffees, great, and you'd be like, dude, why are you piling me with all these Skittles? I don't like them. I don't even care for them. Which is the equivalent of me getting stupid things on the Starbucks app of get a free coffee. I don't care. I don't ever use them. Whereas my wife lives and dies by, right? But again, 2 different preference sets. I like the slushies at McDonald's, the yellow one, the yellow slushie at McDonald's. Yeah, they have slushies, Minute Maid slushies.
Oh, you mean the tropical one?
Yeah, the tropical, the yellow one. Yeah, that's my favorite. Whereas my wife thinks it's too sweet. But again, different people. Now, to go on to what you're saying, parents, what if instead the person gets coffee? Like myself. Exactly. U1, U2, U3. Where lower satisfaction level, medium satisfaction level, higher satisfaction level. Lower, medium, higher. Or lower, medium, higher. And what you notice, why is this person happier here? Because they have more of both goods. And we'll see that this is one of the assumptions that's driving this. As gluttonous as you think this may sound, more is always better. That's one thing we will see here in today's lecture. But more is always better, at least in terms of satisfaction. In reality, it's not, but it's theoretically it is.
So like in these baskets of goods,
Yeah.
There's like for the units of food, there's 10, 10, 10,
Mm-hmm.
right? But then units of clothing is 50, 20, 40. They all have the same level of satisfaction.
Ah, yeah. So that's a good question. So here, what we're saying is that once you start going beyond a certain level, it almost doesn't matter how much more of the goods you're getting. So what you notice here is that instead of it looking like this, it actually is looking more like this, where it's either really steep or really flat, meaning that what we're going to see here is that how many clothes do you need, right? I mean, yes, it's an age-old question, but on some level, right, how many shoes do you need? How many shirts, t-shirts do you need? How many shirts do you need, right? Those of you who've had me for multiple classes, you've seen this button-down shirt many times, right? And the question would be is how many button-down shirts do I need? Or in this case, what we're saying here is that this person, whether they have 50 units of clothing, 40 units of clothing, or 20 units of clothing, they still need a minimal amount of food to survive. 10 is what gets them through the day. After they've got 10, then they can start to make that allocation between the two, right? Which would be the difference then between seeing someone, right? We don't typically see, like, this is an extreme example, but you don't typically see a homeless person wearing a nicely dry cleaned tuxedo, right? I mean, it just doesn't happen, right? Because you would say your preferences are really screwed up, right? Why are you have this nicely dry clean tuxedo when you can't even get the sausage and muffin, right, for $1.50? Like, what's right? But at some level, right, then once you've got enough food to get going through the day, then like I can criticize the person for, dude, you go out to eat too much. But we're not saying that the person isn't eating enough, right? We're just saying you should be buying more clothes than going out to eat. Right? The difference between, again, eating enough to survive versus not being gluttonous, but eating more, and then that money also could have been allocated towards clothing. Does that make sense?
My question was, when you were talking about like the sushi and then like
Yeah.
growing up, is there possible to have like negative satisfaction from like good, so back to like you're talking about if you eat Skittles, you're getting like no satisfaction if you eat Skittles.
Mm-hmm.
If you're like kind of indifferent about getting the Skittles,
Yeah.
is there like possible like situations where like you get negative satisfaction of like getting more Skittles?
So not only are you saying not only do I not like Skittles, I actually
Like lose satisfaction from having Skittles?
yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah. So in that case, the best way to think about this, and I'll ask you to do it here, so this is actually a useful question. So what if I like coffee, meaning it's a normal good to me, more coffee makes me happier, less coffee makes me grumpier, but Skittles, it's not that here, what I was saying is that they don't give me any happiness. I still may consume them, but it's like eating butterscotch candy, right? It's like, you know, it does the job, but really doesn't taste that good and doesn't look fancy. But what if I actually would, what if I was like a militant vegetarian, meaning I couldn't eat it without thinking of animals dying, right? Or really bad things, right? I mean, I know some vegetarians are like, I don't like eating animals, but I'll do it from time to time. But there are some who like, you know, will revolt at the prospect. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay. So then what's interesting about that is that in this kind of right, you can actually start to see one. You can actually start to see one here where. So then we actually start to see them look a little screwy, because what we're saying then is that higher consumption, you don't have to write this down, I'm just kind of playing around with this here, is that higher consumption of coffee has to offset this higher consumption of Skittles, right? And if I don't, that this person would be equally, well, in this case, they need a lot of coffee to offset all these Skittles. If they're not eating a lot of Skittles, which they dislike, they don't eat as much. It's not going to create for you a very good demand curve, though, because a demand curve, remember when we draw it out, is one where the person has a preference for it. In this case, it's a bad good in some sense, and bad goods are harder to graph out this way. But yeah, it's going to start to create funky indifference curves. Okay, so let's talk about what every indifference curve has to do. So there are four major assumptions about what every indifference curve must do. So we all, just to make sure before I do these assumptions, we all clear what an indifference curve looks like. Normally looks like this. It's reflecting these underlying baskets that have different quantities, delivering the same amount of satisfaction. The further you are from the origin, the higher the utility levels. The first thing that we say about all preferences is that they are complete. By that we mean is that every bundle can be compared to another bundle. There's no bundle where we would say, oh, I don't know. So let's go back to explain this a little bit further. Let's go back to this. What if, to go back to Kristen's question, what if my explanation of you need some minimal amount of food to survive, what if it were the case that the minimum level wasn't 10? In other words, what if instead I'm just going off two I remember. I remember there was a 40 and I remember there was a 50. And 20. What's the one with 20? What's the bundle letter for that? Okay. And what about for 40?
H.
Okay. And for 50? Instead, it could look like that. All that we're saying here for completeness, the completeness assumption, is that bundles A through H all have some relationship to each other in some way, shape, or form. It could look like this. Here, what would we say? Would you rather have B or H if I drew it out like this? We'd rather have B. And the reason why you'd rather have B, and the way that you know that is because this indifference curve is further from the origin. So you always prefer bundles that are on an indifference curve further from the origin.
So it's not like you can have too much.
No, there's no such thing as too much in this. As I said, not realistic, but if you're thinking of getting a t-shirt to memorialize today's class, more is always better. Again, not really the reality of the world, but more is always better. Like my wife, who at that Tease Tea, you know, the one on Kiyomoko. Does anyone know this one?
Yes.
Tease Tea?
Yes, we know it.
Oh, do you remember when they had their anniversary back in November, I think?
Was it when they do the podcast where you can drink that huge?
Yeah, and they have this like thing where you have to drink like a gallon.
My
and
friend
then-
did that.
Did Jacob do it successfully?
Yeah, but then like an hour later after he did
Doesn't matter. As long as he made it.
Yeah.
Made
He
it,
got the t-shirt.
but he threw it all up after. He got
Oh,
it.
of course. Yeah, no, of
After-
course.
After that, we called him Boba Jesus.
Yeah, well, my wife keeps talking about someday she's going to do it. And it's hard for me to critique it because, dude, I mean, I've got this sushi thing, so it's not like either of us, not like I can like glass houses, you know.
I think it was for a gift card.
Yeah, you get a gift card, you get your name on a plaque, but I've never seen where the plaque is, and you get a t-shirt.
Yeah, we called him Boba Juice because he paid the price for all of us to get free like stuff. there.
Fantastic is this?
We
Wait,
called
what's his
Boba-
name, Jacob?
Boba Juice Jacob.
Okay, I'm gonna have to get some tips from you. Do you still keep in contact with him?
Here and there.
I'm gonna have to get some tips from you. Anyway, it could look like this, where we would prefer B to H because B has a higher level of utility attached to it. Or, I mean, there's nothing saying here it couldn't also look like this, which is when Kristen asked her question of like, in some sense, it doesn't matter whether it's this scenario or this scenario. The idea is that every bundle can be compared. In the one on the left, in the scenario on the left, B is preferred to H is preferred to G. But they all have a relationship to each other, right? Preferred, the three relationships would be preferred, not preferred, or indifferent. Which would be, in this scenario here, the person really doesn't care for clothes. It's just what they are, right? They're comfortable always wearing the same t-shirt. It's that guy, right? And once he's got a certain amount of food, he's good to go, right? Doesn't really care. Or could look like someone like this, right? Which would be a little bit more normal, which would be, yeah, we all have a variety of clothes and we bring clothes out over time, right? Doesn't say we don't have a style, but we buy enough of the same kind of clothes. It could be one of these two scenarios, but the key thing about completeness is that one of these three relationships has to exist for all of these bundles. Every bundle has one of those three relationships, either preferred, not preferred, or indifferent. To be preferred means that you're on a higher indifference curve. To be not preferred would mean you're on the lower indifference curve. And to be indifferent would mean what? Same, exactly. So when I asked Jacob, what would you pick? Water or juice, right? And he gave me the third option, which I hadn't considered, which was neither. It was hard for me to understand that, right? Just like it's hard for me to understand when my wife chooses water over juice. Now, again, none of what we're talking about here allows me to compare my wife's preferences with my preferences. Each person is different. All we're saying is, why do I always pick juice? And is there a scenario where I would pick water over juice or juice over water, right? And that as much as I love juice, I wouldn't always pick juice, nor would I always pick water. Or I mean, I could, but then you're on like one of those Lifetime shows, right? The guy who couldn't drink juice. Yeah. No, I mean, anyway, again, we're not talking about how much things cost or anything like that. All we're saying is that every basket has a relationship. And those three possible relationships are these three relationships. So far, so good?
So,
yeah.
In that first diagram on the left, with
yeah.
the curves, that still counts as, that still satisfies the assumption that's complete, right?
Yeah, because B is preferred to H is preferred to G, or you could say G is not preferred to H, G is not preferred to B. We would have to plot out more of the points. I was just trying to demonstrate to you that whether you believe my first explanation when Kristen asked, like, why does it have the same amount of food but different amounts of clothing? My response to that wasn't inaccurate if you think that it looks like this, which would mean long head, long tail, which would mean after a certain amount of food, you don't care. But it could just as equally likely look like this. But it doesn't matter because here, B is indifferent to H is indifferent to G is indifferent to H, G is indifferent to B. Still follows completeness. So still okay. Same with this here. Now, then we have transitivity. So transitivity is basically telling us, in this case, that there is consistency. So what that consistency means here is that, and you may have picked up on it when I said it here very quickly, if B is indifferent to H, why do I need the board down like that? I can write on this board totally. Why would you design it so that it turns off? Yeah.
Turn back on.
If B is indifferent.
Wait, why did you just move that board?
Yeah, I could have, but I kind of wanted to keep it up. B is indifferent to H, and H is indifferent to G. What transitivity is saying is that you know what I would write next without me even having to say what it is. Is that if B is indifferent to H and H is indifferent to G, then B must be indifferent to G. So that's our second assumption. First assumption is one of these three relationships must exist. Second assumption is that things are logically consistent. And the logical consistency of this is if one thing is true and the second thing is true, then the first part of the true statement must also then equally apply to the latter part of the second true statement. If G is indifferent to H and H is indifferent to G, if B is indifferent to H and H is indifferent to G, then B must also be indifferent to G. And what that leads us to then is our more is always better, which is where we ran into the problem with Nick's comment of what if you really don't like the thing, right? Because now, obviously, this would pose a problem for our normally shaped indifference curves. I hope it's not my ears going bad.
What is that?
I think it's the computer over there, maybe? Is it? Pants? Is that what's making the sounds? Is there a hole in that computer at the top? What a trailer trash computer going on we got going. Is that making the sound? Put your ear up to it. Is it? Oh. Oh, well, I'm not gonna worry about it. I can live with it. More is always better. And people are never fully satisfied. So it's like an eating contest, basically. More is always better. These are the three. There's a fourth assumption that's not listed here, which is somewhat minor, called reflexivity. We don't need to worry about it. It's not that important. But there is a fourth assumption called reflexivity, which basically says that if A is essentially equal to B and B is preferred to H, then A is also preferred to H. Basically meaning that in this case, or put another way, it doesn't matter in some sense what order I put the two products in. If I reveal to you that it's clothing and then foods, 20 foods and 10 clothings, if I give you another basket that has 10 clothings and 20 foods, basically the opposite order, you should be equally fine having either of those bundles. And they should still have the same relationship to some other bundle, no matter what order you're presenting the two in. The only exception in this world that I have found to that one is, I don't know what your preferences are, but for me, I actually like eating my dessert first before my main course meal. I know that makes me odd though, whereas most people actually prefer main course then dessert. That's the only example in real life where I can actually think of reflexivity actually having any importance, but that's minor for sure. No one cares. So yeah, or some people do it on like special days, right? Or if I guess the other example would be, right, that when are you most likely in the day to eat pancakes in the morning, right? When are you most likely to eat a big thick steak in the evening? Which would mean whatever you eat a big thick steak in the morning. Economics would say with reflexivity, it shouldn't matter. Obviously, it does matter, right? For most people, their preferences are pancakes in the morning, big thick steaks in the evening. Which is, you're the vegetarian, I'm just trying to suss you out, who you are, smoke you out. With all my comments here. Okay, so here's what we know. Each of these bundles have a relationship to each other. we have our more formal definition here of what an indifference curve is. So this will make Pants happy. He gets his formal definition here that he can go with, which is essentially the same thing as I wrote over here. If you plot out all the points, though, you actually see kind of a hybrid between the answer I gave to Kristen and the other possibility for the look like, right? One where B and, I'm sorry, no, it's actually, I was right. I was totally right. No, actually, no, I wasn't. No, it's a hybrid. I said one where B, H, and G were all the same. Here it's written where B and H are on the same indifference curve, which would be going through here, and G would be on a lower indifference curve. And the way that I know it's on a lower indifference curve is if I'm comparing bundles to A is preferred to G, which is kind of what's written out here. E is preferred to A, because AE has more of both goods. So when we're trying to compare all these bundles, you'll notice on this slide, there is no indifference curve drawn at this point. And I can already tell you what the relationship is between E and A and G. I already know what the relationship is. And I know that relationship from more is always better, or less is always worse, I guess the other side. Which would mean E is always going to be preferred to A. I don't need to know any special math to know that E is preferred to A, because it has more of both goods. And G is always going to be worse than A because G has less of both goods than A. The reason why B, H, and D are unknown, yet we know they have some relationship, is essentially, yeah, so what we're essentially trying to say is, did I give up enough food, or did I capture, I guess, enough clothing to offset my loss of food? I'll repeat that again. Basically what we're saying is, like, for instance, here, between B and H, did I get enough clothing, did I capture enough additional clothing to offset my loss of food? So think of this, so my total utility is coming from two things. Quantity of food plus quantity of clothing, marginal utility clothing, marginal utility clothing. Is that my total utility is coming from two things. How much food I have, how much clothing I have, the quantities, and then the math part that we don't know yet is how much does each clothing and food make me happy. The MU standing for marginal utility, meaning how much does each unit of food make me happy. So each unit of food makes me a little happier. I don't know what that amount is because I would have to figure out the math here, which we will do. But basically, if I live a clothing, food life, and those are the only two things I care about, I need to know how much of the two things that I have and how much does each make me happy. And in this graph here, right, what we're saying here is that, as I said before, I need to know whether my loss of food, so this was the thing that was going down, this is the thing that's going up. I need to know if overall, if that matches that. Meaning I need to know if food makes me, or sorry, if clothing makes me twice as happy, then I only have to give up half the amount of food. Right? If one makes me twice as happy, I only have to give up half the amount of food. If I give up 3/4 of the amount of food, then I've clearly given up too much. Right? And now I would be less happy. Which would mean that I would need to do a little bit more math to figure out what exactly is the relationship between B, H, A, and D. We need to do a little bit more math to figure out. We know a relationship exists. They could be indifferent, maybe they're not, but we need to figure it out a little bit more.
Then that's why we draw a curve to and start doing that.
Yeah, so we're going to need to do some math here at some point today, or we'll do it depending on, I want to, the way I'll typically do this is I'll worry about the theory first, and then we'll do the math problems related to it second. There's no point in just doing the math right away, unless you think that way. And I'm suspecting most of you don't. And that's okay, because there's indifference curves. We'll do the math to do this, to figure this out, but you could do the math where, in this case, only the math would have told us, now I know that A is indifferent to B, but that B is now preferred to H, because there would be a lower yet parallel indifference curve that goes through H. So there's an indifference curve that goes through every point. There has to be, because everything has a relationship. So if this indifference curve, U1, isn't going through H, there must be some indifference curve that's actually going through it. And although I'm not going to write on the white screen here, you could add to this here, and you could put an indifference curve here, one that goes through here, and one that goes through here. You wouldn't know it through the math unless you did the math, though, because it's just as likely that it could have been HAD, and B could have been on a higher indifference curve. You would have to do the math to figure out, and we will. We'll do some very simple math related to it, but you would have to do the math to figure out what the relationships are. And there's a point to this, don't worry. Because part of what some of you would then be doing after you have to go into the real world would be doing marketing surveys or figuring out basically what do your customers want, right? Like I remember the time Starbucks had the pomegranate, it was pomegranate like, or something that was like pomegranate something. And there's no pomegranate to be found. So I guess that was just weird that I like pomegranate and not enough other people did, and it got taken off. Just like other things that once were eaten at Starbucks and now we're in the one. Like what? What else? What was your favorite thing that's missing up from menu? I did too. Now you do? Or now you really do? Oh, yes. What about you? Do you like it more or less? What do you?
Oh,
That, we do get a lot of complaints about how that was gone. You know?
all of management is very
Happy or unhappy?
very happy.
Why?
It apparently is terrible.
It's like terrible to like clean up. Terrible because the customers are too fanatical about it. Terrible because
Everything, I think it took long, right?
It took a long time to make just one drink. It's
Something on the sheet.
It's probably like when someone goes to McDonald's and gets the McRib and then their fingers are all sticky and then they like touch everything, right? And it probably like takes a long time to make. People are grumpy when they go there and it's not there. Okay, well, see? If this is anything, well, this class will be an appreciation for the challenges of the barista. What about the mail? Are you still called a barista or a baristo or baristbro? Baristbro? A baristbro?
I'm gonna start calling all of them that.
Yeah, baristbro. What is it? What is that? What are you called?
I mean, I guess a barista, but I mean, it's like less.
Is it like angler, like, you know, fisherwoman versus fisherman would be an angler? Either one. Is it gender neutral?
I guess it is gender neutral.
Interesting.
I've never heard any other term.
Well, it's a baristbro, which I'm now patenting. Okay. I don't need to say anything more about this. This is just reflecting the fact that there are multiple indifference curves in that same space. Nothing too interesting about this. Every indifference, every point having some relationship to each other, meaning that there's multiple indifference curves. But these cannot intersect. And they can't intersect because we're violating an assumption. If A is indifferent to B, because they are both on U1, and A is indifferent to D, because they're both on U2, then B would have to be indifferent to D based on transitivity. But that can't possibly be true. Then here's the violation, because B has more of both goods than D, meaning that we're violating non-satiation, or what's more commonly called as more is always better. So the violation, so these curves are always exactly parallel to each other, never intersect. They cannot intersect. As long as both goods are good goods, things that we want. And not even that you don't even care about skills, we're just saying that more is always better. So you would always prefer a bundle with more food and more clothing over one with less food and less clothing.
They're always parallel to each other?
They're always exactly parallel to each other as long as the goods are
Exactly.
normal goods. Like, you know, it's not that you dislike them, you just normally like them.
Are they like all equally like parallel to each other? Like is U1 equally parallel to U2 as U2 is to U2?
Yeah, well, actually, yeah, so this space is actually filled with a finitely large number. Just to make this look prettier, there's not as many here, but you could imagine this being the space. Actually, I mean, the axes obviously go to infinity, so this would be a finitely large number of indifference curves spreading out into infinity. Oh man, I was so pissed off at my son's preschool teacher last week. You know why? So the preschool teacher asked, "What's the biggest number?" My son said infinity, and she said that's not a real number. I said, "Sure, it's not like a real number, but it's like it's a preschool with not a Catholic preschool, in the Catholic something Protestant, right?" And I'm like, well, it's kind of like a God number, right? And infinity would be a God-like number that only God knows, but it is a true number. How can it be? It's like Santa Claus, right? It's like, you know, like finding out that Santa Claus doesn't exist and close your ears again. Right, but I mean, you can't be telling kids that infinity doesn't exist. I mean, I'd rather have my son knowing that Santa doesn't exist than infinity doesn't exist. Anyway, this goes out to infinity, and there's a finitely large number of points. Sorry, and that there's no Santa, but it's true. There's no
Go ahead,
Santa.
teach that.
Yeah. Oh, just wait till I do my PowerPoint to these preschoolers and teach them no Santa, and then I'll finish it with there is infinity.
That be parallel as long as it's normal.
Yeah, as long as they are just normal, regular, everyday goods, like,
Not inferior.
so you're not like you can eat too much cinnamon or too much water and like you'll die. That's not these kinds of goods. We're just talking like normal everyday things. Like how many shoes are too many? Well, right, we know people that have 1,000 pairs of shoes. We know people that have 1 pair of shoes. Right, and then we know people that have like 1,000 pounds of pasta sitting in their house somewhere, and then people have no right or 1 pound of pasta sitting in their house. No, as long as the people aren't like allergic to one or averse to wearing shoes or whatever, and just normal, uncomplicated, no mitigating circumstances, regular kinds of items, then there'll be a finitely large number of parallel, non-intersecting curves.
Guys, you're not talking in economic terms of normal and inferior.
No.
Literal.
Yeah, I'm actually just talking,
Okay.
yep, literally normal goods. Yep. Although that's a very good question that we'll probably get to by the end of the lecture, which is why you and I think of like you're thinking like a good comments. Yeah. It turns out that normal goods and inferior goods look like this. The one good that does not look like this is actually the incredibly interesting thing called the Giffen good, which economists have been looking for the Giffen good's existence for hundreds of years. Yeah. And someone thinks they found it, but it's pretty, I'm not sure I agree with that. Okay, let me do this one slide and then we'll take a break here. So the slope of this. The slope of this curve is called the marginal rate of substitution. And it reflects the slope. So the slope of it reflects the ratio of these underlying marginal utilities. Because essentially what we're saying here is that it's negative. Obviously here the slope is downward sloping, but it's the ratio of the marginal utility of the good on the x-axis over the marginal utility of the good on the y-axis. And what you're noticing here, which shouldn't be too surprising, is that, do you notice how when we draw these, they seem to get, they're more likely to look like this than they are to look like this. And the reason why they more likely look like this, where they're kind of steeper here and flatter here, which if you had me for the right semester in micro, I did ask a question about it on the exam. Well, why is it steeper here and flatter here? All goes back to the idea that this is me eating 42 pieces of sushi, right? I'd be happily willing to give up 20 pieces for just a little bit more Sprite, because you'd be surprised how fast that goes, right? Just a little bit more Sprite, I'd be willing to give up a lot of sushi just to have a little bit more Sprite. Right? Or if you're on one of those like paleo diets, what do people eat in paleo diets anyway? Are they eating like sticks or what? Fish? Or, is it supposed to be like what we ate as like prehistoric people, right?
Like unprocessed foods, I think.
Fish.
It says meat, seafood, fruits, vegetables, eggs, nuts, seeds, grains.
Dairy.
Yeah, I have no idea. It says it's a modern fad diet requiring the sole or predominant consumption of foods presumed to have been only available or to be consumed by things during the day.
What would you want to do? I mean, it is kind of what I'm eating, but how would we know what they ate? In the Bible, I guess.
Not processed.
As a Catholic, the only notion of history I have is the Bible. I guess we would know from that, right? But how else would we know what cavemen were eating?
Non-processed foods.
So you're not eating a paleo diet, is what you're saying.
Hell no.
What about raisin bran? That's like raisins would have existed, right?
Yeah, but I don't know if it's cereal.
Sugar, yeah.
Oh, sugar. Bro, what do you eat in a typical day? Do you eat vegetarian? Or what do you eat during the day? But you're not like paleo or anything cool with that. Just regular foods, no. You eat any? Oh, yeah. Wait, so is there any food that you really hate in this world? I hate raw tomatoes. For me, I can't eat raw tomatoes.
Hey.
Yeah, it's the only food in this world I cannot.
I hate raw onions and raw tea.
Yeah, raw onions are bad, but I can eat. I mean, if you forced me to eat it, I would get through. I mean, I would too with tomatoes, but it's just. If you served me something at the factory, a burger, and a big old tomato on it, I'd probably take it off. You know, as long as it wasn't like meshed in the burger or something. Okay, so most of the time though, the indifference curves, they are parallel to each other, but they don't look like this. More likely they look like this, reflecting the fact that it's possible to have too much of something. We remember this as a law from principles class, possibly. You want to remember what we would call this?
Law of diminishing marginal utility.
Exactly, our law of diminishing marginal utility. So, how we want to put this here? Flat tails, steep. Right, so guys? The fact that it looks like that more often than not. It's going to be different for each person. I don't think I could eat a pound of Skittles, but I could almost get through a pound of Skittles. Not in a day. In a day, I guess if it was a long day, but it would take me a while, right? And I certainly know people that could go through a pound in like an hour, and I know people that could go through a pound in a year, right? And we know, right, and there's a variety of individuals that exist in this incredibly diverse world. Thank God, right? No, I mean, seriously, right? I mean, that's what makes life interesting, right? That one of you is paleo and not admitting it, and you love fish and grains and cavemen. What do they drink? Water, I guess? Or does it say? No, that's a good question. When someone goes on a diet like that kind of thing, are they usually accompanying a drink? Like if I'm vegetarian, can I only drink V8? Does that seem? Or V8, right? Or only V8. Yeah.
It says it emphasizes drinking water.
That makes sense. Yeah, because if you're a caveman. But what about this? Clean water and dirty water? Right? In the same, like, our cavemen didn't have filter treated fluoridated. Well, actually,
They also have less people dumping in their water.
that's true. That's true. There were no heat companies upstream. That's true. So basically, the law of diminishing marginal utility says as quantity increases, the marginal utility eventually increases decreasing rate. And the last thing I'll say before the break would be, if you're in doubt about this, you're like, dude, I know MU is not Monsters University anymore, and I know I understand the words marginal utility, but I don't exactly know what you mean that is. What I'm saying here is that marginal utility, if the marginal utility of X would be how much is the total utility of X changing as I change the quantity of X. And more likely than not, if I'm just changing this by 1, saying you're getting 1 more X, how much is my total utility from all of the X's increasing by? Put another way, this is my total utility that's coming from food. This is my total utility that's coming from clothing. It's equaling my total utility overall. How are these things changing as they contribute to the marginals? Say breaking that. What time is it now?
6:27.
Wow, I was going to take the break till 6:30. Now that would mean if I was a dick, I'd just give you 3 minutes. Oh no. Let's take till 40. Let's take till 40-ish after, 40 after, and then we'll pick it up from there. I'm just going at my slow, laborious pace here, but we'll pick it up at 40-ish after. Okay, so what kind of other diets are there out there? Paleo, vegetarian, vegan. Wait, what's the difference between a vegan and a vegetarian?
So vegetarians don't eat meat, but vegans can't eat anything that comes from an animal.
Yeah, any meat products like cheeses,
Milk, eggs.
any like products from.
Okay. So vegans are like more hardcore vegetarians.
Yes.
Okay, vegans, vegetarians, paleo. What is it called? Paleolithics, or what is it called?
Paleo diet.
Paleo diet. Okay. Ooh, there's pescatarians. What do pescatarians eat?
Just fish. Fish.
I love fish. Sometimes I think my wife's family's pescatarians. Everything's good. Okay, pescatarians. What else is there? Hmm?
No.
Oh yeah, what's in that one?
Like 70% fat, 25% protein, and 5% carbs.
Oh yeah, I think it's just okay. Oh, and then there's the Atkins diet, right? Isn't that the one where you just eat a bunch of apples? Isn't that the Atkins diet?
Atkins diet is to avoid carbohydrates, but eat as much protein and fat as it is. Oh wait.
Yeah, did you just Google? Yeah, you would have to. Or you can say that quite quickly, though. Have you ever been on the Atkins diet?
No, I googled
On types of diets? Okay, what else is there?
and it said the Atkins diet, the zone diet, ketogenic diet, vegetarian, vegan, Weight Watcher,
Yeah, I guess Weight Watchers count.
South Beach, raw food diet.
What's on the South Beach diet? I keep hearing about that on TV. Eat surfers and pretzels. Indians.
It says it focuses on the control of insulin levels and the benefit of unrefined slow carbohydrates versus fast carbohydrates.
Okay.
Yeah, there's like a whole bunch of them that like talk about insulin levels.
Insulin?
Yeah.
It seems like a diet. Like I know, like for diabetics.
Yeah. Oh, I guess that would be something, right? Like if I had,
It's
oh, I guess now that I'm
probably-
telling you about all the skills I'm eating, probably one of you thinking too exciting. I do not have diabetes.
And
Yeah, I mean, I guess if I had it, then I guess I'd have to go on one of these.
Mediterranean diet. Raw
Oh,
food.
what's Mediterranean? That sounds yummy.
Says emphasis on wild plant foods, fresh fruits as desserts, beans, nuts, whole grains, seeds, olive oil as the main source of dietary fats. Cheese and yogurts is the main dairy foods. The
Sounds
diet
yummy.
includes moderate amounts of fish and poultry, up to 4 eggs per week.
Sounds really yummy. I think if I have to pick one, I think I'm picking that bad boy. That sounds pretty yummy, doesn't it?
Mhm.
That's the one that like all the ecosystems choose to go to.
Yeah.
Like, healthier, like,
Ooh, what's the celebrity diet? What do celebrities go with, you think?
No idea.
I've seen Rob Lowe on TV sometimes with eating a certain kind of. Okay, what else is there? There's any Mediterranean.
I just googled and it showed me the 9 most popular diets rated by experts in 2017.
I just don't think that much about what I'm eating. Yeah, Brent.
So for the game theory,
Yeah.
how would I draw out sequence and the production?
Yeah.
How would I draw it out of say it was Microsoft and Apple,
Yeah.
with Apple being is it inelastic because they can charge high prices because of that.
Yeah.
So which quadrant would Apple choose?
So the only way you could do that one would be. So here's what we know, and I give this as an example because it's probably the best example I can give you. My wife just said this. So right. So if we're talking about phones, for instance, right? We know there's 2 major makers of phones, right? There's Android and there's Apple. And Apple's able to charge more for its stuff because it knows that it has inelasticity, which would then mean that if we're talking about Android versus iOS, right, the 2 operating systems, that Apple knows it's the leader and it can charge whatever it wants. So in those cases, what we're talking about in game theory is low price versus high price, which is why for the exact same specifications, why does Apple stuff always cost more? They know they can charge it, right? They know that it's inelastic. Why does the Android always seem to get screwed over? Because they know their customers could probably equally use iOS devices as they could Android. They just are more price sensitive, right? Which is why they are more elastic. But the reason why I'm giving you this example here though, is that you have to remember Apple sells many different kinds of products, some of which have less inelasticity. Let me give the other example. My wife is in finance, a pretty heavily regulated industry, but it's also one where the corporation chooses all the stuff that she has to do. And in her case, if you're thinking about like portable computer, Apple, right, makes that like iPad Pro, which has like a keyboard, and then you've got like the iPad essentially like on a screen that you could look at. But essentially it's mimicking what the Microsoft Surface is, which is legit keyboard, a more legit screen, and a more legit, kind of like a laptop, but kind of like a tablet, right? It's like for a business person, the Surface is a greater deal more legitimate and more elastic. And the reason why I'm saying that, or even if we just thought of like using Microsoft Word versus using Apple Pages, right? The one that comes into the computer when you buy it, right? The one from Apple. Which would mean that in all these kinds of markets, what I'm saying is that you can't actually have a single matrix for it. You actually have to have one for each product where the company is thinking, Apple is thinking about who's my primary competitor in that space. And the only way it becomes more complicated is, what if it's not a duopoly, but it's a little bit more oligopolistic? Meaning, what if it's not just Apple in the computer space going against Dell? What if they're going against Dell and HP and Alienware, right, or throwing a few others, right? So now they have to do one for each product that they're interacting in. And what we know, what we kind of can remember from this kind of description, is that generally speaking, both companies are better off in that space. I'm not lecturing you, I'm just talking about game theory. That we know from game theory that they're better off in that space, where they're both able to charge high prices and they're both able to get high profits. But we know from price competition that then each of them has an incentive to start to try to charge a lower price. All right, and what ends up happening is that whereas that's the best, it typically goes to one where they enjoy lower profits, but each charges lower price. The only reason why the Apple example is a little bit more interesting is because Apple has a patent on most of its stuff, and you know, for like little kids, like teenagers, you don't see too many of them with Androids because they're a little bit more techy to have to learn and things, right? And not that I hang out with teenagers, but right, I would suspect that most of them are probably more likely to have an iPhone than they are to have an Android with a Samsung, right? And if they do have an Android, it's because their parents made them buy the phone rather than their parents buying it.
With budget constraints also have to do with different utility or investment curves, because obviously like U3 would provide more of both goods or whatever, but
yeah,
that would also probably be priced higher.
So the way that works out, right, is that it works out in two ways. So first, we're not going to see the income in the indifference curve, but here's where you might be going with this, right? What if I get my coffee from like a vendor on the street versus me getting coffee at Starbucks, right? That sends a signal that I'm a little bit of a fancy consumer, right? I got this cup that shows I can spend big money on my stupid silly drink, right? And it sends a signal to others like, dude, Shedding's pretty successful in this world. And so there's something about the allure of having, for instance, an iPhone over like a burner phone, right? That makes you seem like you've arrived. And that's going to be right for teenagers. That's going to be part of their indifference curve as well as the sense that it sends about like what kind of people are. Same, going back to Brent's point of, when we talk about the indifference curve, right, is that Apple knows that the kinds of customers that buy their products are more likely to either not care about the price because they're not paying for it, right? Like in my case, I use an Apple because, dude, you bought it for me. I didn't buy it for myself. The computer I bought for myself is the stupid computer I'm using in this classroom, which is like a cheap Lenovo piece of junk, right? Because, dude, if I have to pay for it, I don't care which one it is. But, right, if I want to make my life easy in my office, I'll buy an Apple because I can figure things out of how it's working. All this goes to the point of it'd be better if Apple and Microsoft could just both equally agree to charge high prices, but the pressure is always on for them to each lower their prices. And the only reason why the Apple story is so extreme is because Apple has pretty successfully, using their monopoly powers, been able to say, dude, Microsoft, if you want to lower your price, you can, and we're still going to charge you what you want. And the only way that this is not unraveled is look at the data of how many people are buying iPhones, upgrading their iPhones today. The iPhone 10s, the 10R, XR, or XS, not enough people are upgrading from the iPhone 8 or 7 or even 6 to the iPhone X or 10. Which means Apple is starting to get concerned because they're charging $1,099 for the XS Max. And people are saying, dude, I can do it all with my iPhone 8. Or I'm just going to get a Samsung where I can, put in more memory or change the battery more easily. So what Apple is starting to get concerned about is that whereas this was true, let's say 3 years ago, where Apple was able to charge a high price, Microsoft was charging a low price, but Apple still made money doing it. It's very slowly slipping over here. So the reason why we know this is because my wife bought a new phone, the XS Max, or as the guy said, 10S Max. But it's $1,099, and they have this like regular plan where if you give me your old phone, you get like a certain discount on the new phone. But because the phone, the XS Max, wasn't selling well, they doubled the value that they would pay you for your old phone, which is a whole way of basically lowering the price without really lowering the price. Do you get what I'm saying?
Wouldn't be any other indicators
Of this
yeah,
of this happening or
yeah, that scenario
of this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
With that, would any indicator of that, each of the products be budget models or?
Yeah. So the primary one would be sales, because of their products. Yeah, because each company is a publicly listed firm, which means that every quarter they have to say how many units they're selling, which would mean. So what Apple did very sneakily last year is they stopped telling investors how many iPhones they're selling. Yeah. So what they then just said is, we're just going to tell you how many. I think it was like how many like. We're not going to break it down with Macs and iPads and iPhones and all these things. We're just going to tell you all the iOS devices in total that we sold. Obviously, all it does is it hides the fact that now you don't know how many of these actual devices are being used. But sales would be the primary way, because right now, right in the whole scheme, now investors can't tell, has Apple lost its pricing power, which is why Apple was the most had the highest market capitalization right now of almost any other, and it might be number 1 or number 2, depending on what the price is today. But it's the reason why the Apple has the highest share prices, because investors thought, dude, this is a company, they can charge high prices and not be bothered by what these other firms are undercutting them in price. But now, right, I mean, the idea is that, how old is the iPhone now? 10, 11 years old, right? 12 years old? My first phone was for, I had that until last year. But now I'm on the SE. But the idea, right, is that at some point, whether it be a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, it's not going to be the primary phone we all use, right? There's going to be something else that comes along. Just like 10 years ago, I was using a BlackBerry. Dude, no one uses a BlackBerry anymore. Or that, right? You remember the Nokia phones where you had the game Snake? Anyway, right? All these things, right? It's going to change. So you can try to hide it for a little bit if you're in charge of finances at Apple, but eventually you can't hide it that much. And you're going to be selling these regular commodities just like that. So Apple is going to be no exception to this rule. But you're going to always go back to this point. Or if I made this high price, low price, go back to this point. But they're basically going to be convenient. So that, yeah, Apple's got the dominance right now. Google, right, through Android, is your alternative, right? Samsung and whatnot are the manufacturers, but dude, who knows with the, right, Amazon, they had a phone for a little bit, but who knows, maybe they'll make a phone, right? Or, again, or like, let's make it instead of Apple and Microsoft, right? Again, the example of Amazon Prime versus Netflix. Okay, let's go back. Does that answer your question? Yeah. I never saw that. I never watched that show. The ones where the kids are involved in the mystery from the 80s and the sheriff has to solve, the one on Netflix. Is that on Netflix? Stranger Things, yeah. Has anyone watched it in here?
I was considering it on that too.
Is it good?
Lots of 80s nostalgia.
Oh, okay, so maybe I'd watch it for that then. Okay. No, I like the nostalgia. Okay. Let's see here if this is complete. Okay. So the marginal rate of substitutions we're saying here is how much do I have to give up? How much am I willing to, how much amount of extra utility do I get when I either get more or less of a certain product? What that means, what the marginal rate of substitution combined with this law of diminishing marginal utility does, is it creates convexity for the indifference curve. Convexity meaning that it's bowed inward towards the origin. That convexity basically again means that we have long tails and steep heads to this curve. So basically what it means is that as we go from left to right along the curve, and you may, if you had 130, you may remember me saying this on and on and on, but as we move from left to right, the marginal rate of substitution is getting lower and lower and lower in magnitude. Right, it's getting, the slope is getting flatter and flatter, and it's reflecting the fact that if the slope of this so here's what we're saying here, is that it's negative because it's downward sloping, and it reflects the marginal rate of substitution, MRS. The marginal rate of substitution, which is the formal name of the slope of the indifference curve, is the ratio of the two marginal utilities. And as we go from left to right, two things are happening. Quantity of coffee is going up, which would mean that the marginal utility of each additional coffee is going down. And then as we go from left to right, you see that my Skittles is falling, which would mean that then my marginal utility is exactly. So if this is going down and this is going up, it's highlighting the fact that this overall slope is falling. And you go the opposite way too, right to left rather than left to right. But the law of diminishing marginal utility is what's driving the overall direction or shape of the indifference curve. And that's basically convex, curvilinear towards the origin. Now, it's important because almost normal goods, normal meaning everyday goods, because what about all the other interesting things, right? Interesting things being, what if the goods, the two products do have some relationship to each other? Like, what if I was wearing a fish costume made of fish? Because it's got to be both clothing and food. That's why I'm saying this. Right? What if I was wearing a giant taco shell that I could eat the shell, right? As I'm That would be so cool. Or a giant Skittle. I could like lick myself and it would taste like a
Oh my gosh, wait, no, that is
what?
Skittles commercial, where they have the Skittles.
Oh yeah, and he's got those Skittles on his head, yeah. And the one girl like eats the one off of yeah. Yeah, that's right. And if you had to be a food, you had to wear a food, what food would you wear?
I like the taco shell idea.
Yeah, the taco shell, yeah. You put some salsa on this arms and like
What if it's a shirt where like it has printed food on it, and then you can just pick out the shirt and food comes out?
now you could do that, yeah. Or what if you were a vending machine and you'd be like, ah, and then like Slim Jims came out of your like belly button or something? Yeah, I mean it'd be fantastic. I have so many great ideas.
Oh yeah, we're gonna get a shirt.
Yeah, we gotta make that shirt. That's right. Fast money raises my interest, baby. Oh God, that would be a shirt. So, what if the two things are related to each other, like shoes and socks? I don't know about you, but in this kind of relationship, what I'm saying here is that I've got the quantities of two goods, quantity of socks, quantity of shoes. Right? That if they look like this, so this is not what they should be here. So don't, I'm drawing this so that you can kind of see why it can't look like a normally shaped indifference curve. I mean, like, let's just make it actually more curved like this here. Right? Why can't it look like this? What would be the problem with that? Exactly, and they can't substitute for each other, right? So I mean, yeah, I could walk with just socks on outside, but socks aren't going to stop me when I'm walking on rocks. And I could just wear shoes, but that'd be kind of uncomfortable for my feet. Meaning that most of the time, when I wear socks and shoes, which are what kind of goods? Substitutes or complements? Complements. The complements, most of the time, look like this. Meaning that I need a specific combination of shoes and socks to make me happier. I need a specific combination of shoes and socks to make me happier. And having, right, or if you don't like this example, make it quantity of left shoes, quantity of right shoes. As long as we're not talking about like pirates here, right? They need both one shoe on the left hand, on the left foot, one on the right foot. Or in this case, let's say a specific combination, a 2-to-2 relationship, 2 socks, 2 shoes, or 2 single shoes. We don't buy, although what's interesting is that there are a variety of sock types that exist out there and a variety of shoe types that exist out there, such that I don't know where you're buying your shoes, but I've always bought my shoes in pairs, left shoe and right shoe of the same shoe. But I've never bought, I take that back. When I got married and I rented the tuxedo, it came with socks and shoes. But I've never beyond that bought shoes and gotten socks with it for free, right? Or that they were combined in some way, socks with shoes. I bought my socks separate, I bought my shoes separate. On the other hand, I've never bought shoes that have shoelaces that didn't include the shoelaces. So, right, from a marketing perspective, again, you have to think about, should I let people bundle my product or not? Or should I force them to bundle my product? So let's go back to my McDonald's example, right? I can buy my hash brown, just the hash brown. I can buy my breakfast sandwich, just the breakfast sandwich. I can buy my coffee, just the coffee. Or I can buy them all together in a meal. Now, what if, on the other hand, actually I think they do only sell an egg, don't they? I think at McDonald's. What if I only wanted the bun? I'm sure they would do it for me, right? But they'd probably charge me for the whole sandwich, right? Why wouldn't they want to give me less than the same price, right? But the idea is McDonald's allows me to bundle them differently because they know there's enough people that don't like sandwich, only like the hash browns, right? And vice versa. But again, you don't find too many individuals that wear shoes, but not socks. But making it more interesting, we know that some people like socks that go up to their ankles. Some people that like, socks that are basically at their foot level. Some like them really cushy. Some like them really thin, right? Everyone's got such different sock preferences that there's no way of knowing. Just like I told you for the, wait, did I tell this class the Happy Meal? Like when you order a Happy Meal? Or is that my other section? Is that 396? That when you get a Happy Meal, you can get a large soda with Happy Meal.
You can.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So when this is a good tip for you all when you have kids, you can buy them a Happy Meal, and instead of them getting like apple slices, you can actually order extra fries. And instead of getting them like a little dinky apple juice, you get a large cup. Like, right? So I mean, there must be some level where, right, someone has said, dude, like in my case, I'm like, dude, I'm done to get a Happy Meal. I'm just gonna like steer into the skid and just get on like a giant Coke. I mean, why make them, I'm sure an apple juice is just as unhealthy and a lot less interesting. So yeah, I mean, so let's go to town on a Coke. But the idea is, right, from your perspective, right, you've got to think that when you're a company and you're selling stuff and thinking about, does it make sense to bundle it? You have to know a great deal about your cross-price elasticities. Or, what am I selling here? If there is a substitute or a complementary relationship, how strongly is that relationship? Truly, right? Is it the case that I can get like I don't know, do they bundle muffins with coffees at Starbucks?
Oh, yeah.
So there's a meal, right? Is there a meal price, or do I just order them separate?
The Starbucks app probably does it, but like, I mean, it's never fixed. Like those deals, so hard to say.
Oh, okay.
It's whatever corporate decides for whatever day they want to give a deal for.
Mm. Oh, wow. Sensitive, trust them. Yeah. Corporate. No, but think about the strongest complementary relationship that I can possibly think of. Dude, cola and eating pizza, right? Drinking Pepsi and eating Pizza Hut pizza. I mean, dude, I don't see how you can do the one without doing the other. Hot dogs and hot dog buns. Yeah, dude, I don't care what my mom says. You cannot put those things on bread, right? It is not the same thing.
No.
So again, right, you get to the age-old question that economists have never been able to understand, which is why does one in packs of 12 and the other in packs of 8? It doesn't make any sense, right? Because it's absolutely true that there's a very strong complementary relation. I don't know what else you would do with a hot dog bun that you would. I mean, what else would you do with it? Yeah, you're a cook, aren't you? You're a cook of some kind. A cook in disguise. Yeah, I suppose you could make garlic bread, like with some fancy buns or something, right?
No, just the regular ones.
You should teach a cooking class. I'll take it. Do you really cook a lot or no?
I don't know.
Well, you do that pretty well and pretty fast. I didn't even think of that.
Well, I switched shifts, so then I have a late shift now, so.
Oh, okay.
When I have like the morning.
Okay. Well, it's more microwave. I don't know. I don't cook. My mother-in-law cooks every meal for me. I never get to pick anything. So it's hard because I grew up eating sandwiches. There is not a single loaf of bread in my house. You know how hard that is? Oh, God, it's hard. Yeah, I have any fridge in my office, but I'm not going to start buying my own bread. It just seems, what am I going to do is come to class and so good around.
See?
It would be really good right now. Okay, so there's, so we know that there are complements that exist like this. In our case of the perfect substitutes, let's get our perfect substitutes going. Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, I'll go with it. I feel like most people, well, if you're like me, I guess, which could be good or bad. Probably don't care which one you're drinking. I mean, I'll drink Coke when I'm on campus because that's the only one in the vending machines. I'll drink Pepsi when I'm somewhere else because it's my only choice. I think it really matters. They both taste the same. You're both killing yourself. With both of them. Which would mean that the trade-off's always the same. Meaning there's no law of diminishing marginal utility and the slope is always constant. Whereas here, the slope is infinite or undefined. Because I don't know what you would do with one right shoe and two left shoes. I don't know what you would do. Donate them, donate for one shoe. But there's almost no value to it.
MR is a slope.
Yeah, marginal rate of substitution is a slope. Why did you take your left shoe? I want to hear this. Wait, did you say you don't want to hear this? Oh yeah, I was gonna say, why would you not want to hear this? Why did you take your shoe? Where?
You know,
In Honolulu?
no, I was coming back from Maui on we went to States area.
Yeah.
And then was coming back from Maui.
Yeah.
And I had to go, like me and my coach both got stopped by security.
Yeah.
And none of my other tennis friends got stopped. And we didn't get tickets with her.
Yeah. Wait, is this not, this was in Honolulu or this was in Maui?
This is in Maui.
Okay, go on, yeah. Yeah, go on, yeah.
What happened was my coach got he got off scot-free, right?
Mm-hmm.
While they pulled me aside, they had to do like a full scan on me.
Yeah.
I look at my stuff, they gave me back my stuff, they gave me back my laptop, everything, they gave me back my one tennis shoe.
Didn't you realize it pretty quickly or were you just trying to like skedaddle and get out of it?
No, I realized pretty quick, where's my left shoe? It's like, I see it in a bag, like a evidence bag or something like that, and they just took it away and was like,
oh. Was it a good pair of shoes? So how does this story end? What'd you do? Like walk around barefoot or how?
I didn't walk around, I had to borrow my friend's slides.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's kind of
and then they just like move along.
No, that's a sad tale.
No, give me my shoes.
I guess it would be like things like, oh, I guess there was one that was a really big annoyance. So my wife bought those like Dyson, those like fancy vacuum cleaners, but it's the one that has like the hose, but it's like not like a big vacuum, but it's like one you always have like charging on your wall that you could then like take out and then like use. Apparently the wall mount is sold separately. No, the wall mount for the vacuum cleaner is sold separate from the vacuum cleaner. Like, why? Those two go together. I mean, like, why would you put your like vacuum on the floor to charge? Like, wouldn't you put it on your wall so that you could? Even the picture on the box shows like, some like suburban American loving mom like pulling it off, the thing to like to vacuum something. So it didn't make any sense that you had to buy it, and you had to buy it. I mean, essentially to use it. And this is the thing that made it interesting. So I looked up, because then I looked up and I was like, dude, I think that we bought it at Walmart. I was like, I bet you Walmart's screwing us over here. Like, I'm thank God for the internet where you can find out things, right? Do you know how many forums exist that were populated where people were complaining about this? It was amazing. Like, how many people say, and like I was able to deduce the date of when it happened, of like when people started populating this thing to say that this is no longer part of it. One, it says a lot about people that they would like post these kinds of things, but two, it made me grumpy because, dude, perfect compliments, right? Shouldn't the holster for the device be, anyway, the holster for the device should be part of the vacuum cleaner, but it was not.
How many forms?
Oh, there were, let's go, let's introduce the ask here. Let's see. No, well, there were quite a few. Let's see what we would call this here. Let's see here. What is this going to be called? Is it going to be called the Dyson wall mount included with vacuum? There's going to be. Okay, so let's start to here, right? So here's where you can buy it, right? So we're all happy here, right? The thing, okay. Let's see here. Wait, but if I knew what the exact number was, right? So we're already starting here. Here's one, right? This is the Best Buy one here. We're gonna get more forms here. Okay, so as you start to go through these things, right? So each of these things, each of these reviews, people then populate each of these reviews with like, does it include it or not? And again, you're able to pretty quickly realize that it's not included with it. Oh yeah, let's see here. Oh, here she's right here, right? She's right there. See that she. It's true though. Like on the box, she has it. Oh, there she is, right there. See, she's got the mount. She lives in a super clean house, and this one does not.
So clean that
She wears white things. Yeah, look at this. So again, like you can see if you go through this, again, there are multiple forms. I kid you not, there were multiple forms, enough that I was able to deduce when they stopped doing it and realizing it wasn't Walmart's fault, it was Dyson's fault that they did not include it. You know, help nations. Yeah, anyway, they should have been included, and it wasn't, and it made me grumpy. My wife told me to just drop it, and I clearly did not because I'm now talking about it with you all. So, but I will. But it made me the same thing, right? Of tacos without free sauce, right? Or burgers without buns, or burgers without ketchup, or fries without ketchup, or right? I mean, think of your complimentary things, and if all of a sudden you no longer get it, then you're like, dude, right? I was expecting to get, if my shoes came without shoelaces, I would be pretty grumpy, for the most, unless I bought them that way. I don't know, I guess. Bad. So then the bads are not going to be able to be represented by this. Depends how bad they are. Are they bad because they don't give you any happiness, or do they actually take away from your happiness, right? So here's our substitutes: orange juice or apple juice. Again, one-to-one trade-off doesn't matter. Right shoes and left shoes, it's a pretty easy, perfect complementary relationship. Where again, we're at angles here where it's either 0 or undefined. But let me tell you about my first car. My first car was a 1995 Chevy Luna, which on the mainland was a pretty popular car in the 90s. Imagine, picture this. It's a very Midwestern car. I mean, I lived in the Midwest, and it's a very Midwestern car. I want to get the full effect. I want to find the gray one. That's a pretty good description of it. Yeah. So, yeah, it looks like a very mainland. It wasn't my car originally. It was my mother's originally, and you know, it just looked like a. That one's actually a little bit more interesting and exciting than mine. Anyway, the car did not include power steering.
What?
It was an option. You had to buy it as an option. And my mother was too cheap to buy it. I love my mother, but she's rather cheap sometimes. And she decided not to buy it with the option of power steering or power brakes. Do you know how hard it is to drive a car without power steering or power brakes, or pass the driver's test without power steering or power brakes? It's really, really hard. Now, think about the things that we take for granted in today's cars versus, right, like my car I'm driving now came with a cassette player, no cruise control, does have power steering and power brakes. On the windshield wiper, I can only go low or high. I can't do intermittent. So if it's like drizzling, there's nothing I can do about it. My steering wheel does not go up or down. It obviously just turns. It just does not tilt in any way. No, I'm talking about my real, well, now now I'm talking about my Corolla in the parking lot. It does have automatic locks, but it's only got an airbag for the driver, and not for the passenger. So, dude, if I'm asking you to come on a car ride with me, you better insist on driving. You know, but the reason why I say this is because the reason why I'm going through this is that the preferences change over time. And that's really the kind of the point of what I'm saying, is that in 1995, there were enough probably old people that bought Chevy Luminas where they didn't want this new fancy power steering thing that they thought was just going to screw up things, right? And or in my car, like, what, 2 airbags? That seems unnecessary, right? But we can imagine these ideas that with my wife's car, who was only made in 2005, like a few years later, right? She's got like side airbags, she's got like front, like 2 in the front, like, you know, it's like surrounded with airbags. She's got power steering, right? She's got power brakes, she's got like all this, it tells her what the temperature is outside. Mine does none of those things, right? So it's a luxury car from my perspective. But, right, in these kinds of things, what we're saying is that the dynamics of these kinds of things, these preferences change over time, which means if you're any company worth, you know, staying in business for the long run, you would try to figure out how are your preferences changing of your consumers. Right? So the example that I could give of this would be, Al Moana, right? Let's think of the fanciest, one of the fanciest stores we can think of. Neiman Marcus, right? Neiman Marcus is a pretty fancy store, kind of sort of, right? But who shops there? Really old women is basically who shops at Neiman Marcus, essentially. For the most part. But what do really old women, do they shop at the physical store or do they shop online? Physical store, right? That's what old women do, right? They shop at the physical store, they don't shop online. Now, what that means though is that, dude, old women are either dying or they're not buying as many clothes anymore, which is why Neiman Marcus is going out of business, right? Well, they're going bankrupt because they don't have a really good digital strategy. Because, dude, right? I mean, the idea is that, right? She's not going to go and do shop at Neiman Marcus, exactly, right? But maybe she would if they were online and they were selling the kinds of things she wants, right? I mean, they sell some kind of like cool stuff, I'm sure, right? That maybe you would buy the same brand, but you're just not buying those brands at that store because either they don't have a web presence, or in your mind, you're like, dude, that's old women's shop, right? That's not where I shop. There's a variety of reasons. But why is Neiman Marcus going bankrupt? It's not because they're bad luck. Dude, it's poor corporate planning, right? Of thinking about why, right? Or that's exactly the Sears, right? And this is exactly what's going on in Sears. Right? Or why we could say that, well, McDonald's now has an app, right? Starbucks has an app, right? And then there's a certain group of customers that are going to really want the app, and there are some who would never use the app. Just like some would always shop online, and some would never shop online. But the problem is, right, is that if you start to design a corporate strategy that doesn't take into account changing preferences, then you won't be prepared for a growing set of customers, or even your existing customers changing their mind of what they want, right? Which would be this, again, let's go back to vehicles, right? Is that 15 years ago, right? You could get a Toyota Prius, but it was like a pretty like fancy thing to get, and people didn't exactly know how to drive hybrid cars, right? Now every manufacturer now has a hybrid car, right? Or at least some model in their line that is hybrid in some way, right? And even some have electric now. But some might say, oh, we don't even have an electric car in our lineup, right? So again, you could just say, you know what, we're not going to make electric cars. We're only going to make trucks. Or what Ford and Chevy decided to do last year is that they decided besides the Camaro and the Mustang, each of them decided they're not going to make regular cars anymore. They're only going to make SUVs and trucks. Obviously, they think that that's where the money is and that's where they want to go at. But it's in an era when gas prices are really cheap. Well, what are people going to want 15 years from now? Well, dude, it's going to, I mean, it's hard to say you're not going to sell cars and you're not going to sell cars and only trucks anymore because you're obviously limiting the kinds of customers that you can sell it to by doing it in that kind of way. And that's what this is portraying, is that you need to continually be doing marketing studies to figure out what do your actual customers want or what do your potential customers want, right? And what people want in one place is obviously going to be, right, what we call at McDonald's the local breakfast, right, which would be Spam and rice, right? They're not going to be eating that in like Ohio, right? Not making fun of Ohio, but still, it's Ohio. Okay. So here's our utility and our utility function. What I'm saying here is that the utility is a combination of these two products forming this indifference curve. The further we go from the origin, the higher the utility that's attached to these things. So unless someone stops me, I'll just keep going here. Which then leads me to this pretty important slide. So you might be thinking, well, dude, what does U equals 100 mean as a utility number? Like, how much satisfaction does that really mean? And the thing is that the number is unique to myself and doesn't mean anything to anyone else. It's only relative, it's only interesting to me because it is how I rank order, or ordinal number, how I rank order everything. So utility numbers are ordinal numbers, not cardinal numbers. So meaning first, second, third place, as opposed to 1, 2, 3. So I cannot say, so it's a binary condition. I can never say that if I'm on utility curve 100 versus utility curve 50, or that you're at utility curve 50 and I'm at 100, it doesn't mean I'm twice as happy as you. It just means I'm happier. And I can't even compare these across individuals because your 50 might be better than my 100. It's all relative, right? Watch those like shows on like Lifetime where like the person has like 100 dot matrix printers, right? Because they're like hoarders, right? And they get utility out of hoarding things. I mean, right? I mean, crazy things exist out there, right? Where people, that's where they get their happiness. The reason why we watch those shows is because it seems so abnormal. Like, how could someone be getting happy out of storing used cat litter, right, in boxes, right? But for them, I'm not trying to make light of this, right? Because there's a host of psychological disorders that are probably contributing to that, right? But there's something in their mind where that makes sense, right? And there's, right, we could call it a disease, or we could just call it their normal, right? And it's not necessarily that we need to go in there and start correcting it, right? I mean, in society, we try to do something, right? You can't just like, can't marry a cat. You can't like, you know, you can't, what else can't you do? You can't marry a firework, right? I can't marry inanimate objects. I can't marry animals, but, right? I can marry another human being, right? And I mean, I guess if I really love fireworks, I might be like, dude, why can't you say I can't marry fireworks? I love fireworks. I love this one so much I want to marry. But the reason why that's important, right, is that the problems usually in society, right, usually come about from people imposing their ordinal utility on others, right? Dude, I like calculators. I like calculators a lot. I like them more than you. It'd be bad news bears if I imposed the law saying you have to like calculators too, right? Or why old professors always seem to make this rule where you can't use your phone as a calculator. Dude, what other purpose is there for a phone than the calculator function? You can still remember on my iPhone, before it had the flashlight function, and you had to download an app to have the flashlight function. Do you remember that? Actually, the one that's really interesting that Apple still does not do, and you've probably never thought of it, but I have thought of it. Did you know that in Europe, the iPhone has an FM radio, and that here it does not? Right? So, like, Doesn't that just say, I mean, I know that like listening to FM radio is like points me out as a grandpa, but sometimes, dude, FM radio is kind of cool, right? Or at least it's free to listen to, right? But right, there's some arcane laws that say, dude, if you're gonna get your right, that Apple is allowed to not let me listen to FM radio, and of course they would want me to not listen to it because they want to sell me it, right? So, right, but that's imposing again utility. What one company's corporate interests are over what makes me happy, right? And generally speaking, that's probably bad for my ordinal utility. So I guess I'm gonna have to move zero. What do we see here though? Is it true? So this is what the bottom part of this then describes. Is are richer people happier? I have generally found that to be true. Is that richer people generally are happier, or at least they cloud their unhappiness better than poor people. I don't know. I mean, I like my wife's friends at work, but dude, they are like stupid rich, and they always do seem really happy. Like they don't just wear regular Aloha shirts, you know, they're wearing like, you know, the fancy ones, you know, they throw up in Teslas, and then my wife meets them park 2 blocks away, right? I mean, we know that richer people are generally happier. Why are they happier, generally speaking? They buy more stuff, right? Now, again, I have this friend who, Wendy Lee, she just went on this like whole minimalism phase. Oh, it's so annoying because she always posts about it on Facebook, and yet I still read it, so I don't know what's more annoying about that. But she like takes these pictures, like, you know, like the whole thing, the whole craze now, that Marie Kondo thing, where you have to like hold things, think about whether you want it, and then throw it away or whatever. Well, she does this, and she's like a nomad now, so she like constantly travels, and she like always is getting rid of stuff, doesn't like stuff. And then I thought about it, I was like, well, she and I were friends like 15 years ago. I don't think we'd be friends now. And I was trying to think, well, what does that mean, right? As we were growing older, and we all grow apart from each other, right? And you think about your friends you had in high school and whether they'd be your friends today. For the most part, they wouldn't be because you're different and they're different. But the reason why I'm saying that is because, right, for the most part in our society, we generally attribute more to having more stuff to being a happier person, and which is why this whole Marie Kondo thing, is that Marie Kondo, isn't it? Right, that's why she's such an interesting phenomenon, because her philosophy is exactly the opposite, so it makes it interesting. The reason why I say it is because I was at this Chinese New Year's dinner on Saturday with all my wife's fancy friends, and they were all talking about the one guy was like, oh, I put stuff in my hands, I feel really happy. There's no way I would ever have enough time to even think, do I feel happy about this? And, you know, you can't. It's obviously a life philosophy, and I'm just describing to you what is the general life philosophy in this world, because that one does buy happiness. The only exceptions to this are, I don't know, monks, priests, gurus. I don't know. But even then, nuns steal, priests steal, so they must be getting happy off of riches anyway. So don't trust anybody. That's what you should learn today. Don't trust anybody. Okay, let's go to the other side of this, budget constraints. So let's start back with the same. So now we've done number 1, which is indifference curves. Now, let's say that I have to buy Skittles and I have to buy coffee. I know how much Skittles cost. That one I know pretty well. $2.69 a pound.
Is Skittles your favorite candy?
Oh, by far, yeah. There's nothing better in this world.
Which one, original?
Yeah, original. I like the sour too, but the only thing I don't like about it is that you can't eat a whole bag without your tongue really hurting because they're just so sour. Whereas like regular Skittles, they leave a bad taste in your mouth, but you can still eat a lot of them. I think. Anyway, they're $2.69 for approximately a pound. How much is a cup of coffee? Or what style? Regular, nothing fancy about it. What's the big grande?
I guess like 275. I don't know.
Oh, perfect. That's a good. Okay, let's call it 270, Let's split the difference here.
Could be wrong, but
That's all right. It's close enough. Actually, we should make it something. Let's make this a little more interesting. I'm sure there's a $5 cup of coffee, right? Somewhere around. I'm sure there is. I don't know what a 5-pound bag of Skittles would look like, but I'd like to eat that $5. I'd like to eat that $5 bag. But the idea here is that what if I told you you have $100? So that's your budget. So whereas you had multiple indifference curves all attached to different, you had multiple indifference curves all matched to different utility levels. What if I then say that you only have one set level of income? Like in this, you have $80, and you only have $80. So what if I devote all of my $100 to coffee? Then the maximum amount of coffees I could buy would be the price of coffee, sorry, my total income divided by my price of coffee, which would be 100 divided by 5, which would equal 20. So this will be a 20. So that's my first, this is my x-intercept. Alternatively, I could have total income divided by the price of Skittles, which would equal 250 over 100, right, which will equal 40. And connect the dots. And this is a straight line. And it's a straight line because let's say that I could split up my coffee into portions, decimals. And I could split up my Skittles into portions, decimals. The trade-off would always be approximately 1 to 2. Always, right? That if I could sell very small units of coffee in the exact same equivalent weight or whatever of Skittles, it would be a 1 to 2 ratio always. Doesn't change. We're assuming here no quantity discounts or anything like that. Are there quantity discounts at Starbucks? Like what if I, oh, there is? Oh, okay, well. But like how many do I have to buy to get a quantity discount?
Oh, quantities?
Yeah, like what if I want 20 coffees? Do I get, no?
Well, like you buy that big, the jug.
You can buy the jug, I guess, right?
Yeah. That's, fixed price.
What's a fixed price per cup? I mean, it's a fixed price for Skittles. Trust me, I would know that one. So there's no quantity discounts for that bad
Isn't
boy.
it that the higher bigger size you get, the amount of coffee you're saying?
Well, there is that, yeah. But more of what I'm talking about, like right, if we looked at T-shirts, like buying T-shirts, if you buy only one T-shirt where you make the logo, and it's really expensive. But if I buy 15 of them, the same design, it's cheaper. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Well, like what if when there was a buy total of dollars?
Yeah, so right, so the other side of it would be, right, especially if you go to Safeway, right, it's always like, if you buy one, it's like $10, but if you buy 3, you'll pay like $22, which makes it a little cheaper, but only if you buy it like in a set of 3 rather than anything else. So this is going to be, this slope is going to be the price of the good on my x-axis over the price of the good on my y-axis. Or in this case, price of coffee over price of Skittles. That slope is constant, does not change. And that's what we're seeing here. So if in this case, I have $80, I could do nothing but buy clothing. So it looks like then the clothing is $2, and it looks like the food is $1, right? Just to do see what I've got here. Looks like the food is $1, and the clothing is $2. and they add up to my total income. This one's pretty simple because I've either got the money or I don't. If I'm below the budget constraint, I've got extra money, which in economics, it's good that you save, but in most of the time, you don't want to be saving money here. You want to be spending all your money. And you can't spend beyond your income, although you can, but right, then you either have to marry rich or, right, or get a payday loan or something, right, to go beyond your budget constraint. So basically, the constraint is just the reality of your financial situation, the existence that you have. And we obviously all know stories where people save way too much, right? And that's also a problem too, right? What if you like, what if I had a job, but I was living under, under the H1, right? I mean, you'd be like, dude, checking, what are you doing, right? Why aren't you spending any money on housing? Or what if I always had to come to class and say, bring me food every day, otherwise I don't eat today, right? I mean, again, you'd say, well, why aren't you bringing your own food or eating food? But what this does is you get to start to get the idea that we can start to put this together where, again, demand is going to reflect what I want, the indifference curve, and what I'm able to do, my budget constraint. The income can change. So here, we're keeping the same slope because the prices aren't changing, but now I have either more income or less income. Still a straight line though. This is going to prove to you, by the way, why are richer people happier. This is going to be useful for understanding that, which we'll see. But theoretically, it is true, richer people are happier. Again, they're more fucked up in other ways, but generally speaking, they are. I mean, right, how many episodes do you need to watch of Real Housewives of X? And, right, you realize that rich people have problems too. $1 Million Listing, has anyone ever watched that show? Like people that sell, real estate agents that sell like $1 million houses, you'd think they'd be really happy because they have like all this money. Well, people selling $1 million houses turn out to be really rich too. But it turns out that they have other problems, like they work too much and they get like a lot of divorces, and I mean they're screwed up in other ways. So maybe sometimes you should just be happy with what you have. What if instead I have the same income level, but the price of the good on the x-axis changes in price? If the good becomes more expensive, it pivots inward. If it becomes less expensive, it pivots outward. Think again of what is that intercept reflect? It reflects your income divided by the price of the product. And that's what it looks like here. Now here, the clothing is not changing in price, but the food is. Questions so far? I'll wait to see if there's questions. So here again, this is income, total income is not changing, just the price of the product itself. And it only gets me halfway through the slides. And what time is it right now?
7:32.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Holy crap. I just find this so cool and interesting. I'm not going fast enough. But I'm not going to speed up because that's the point. Let me finish this with this slide, and this will be my last slide. I know we go to like 7:50, right? But I'm going to just finish it with this slide because it takes too much time, and the really cool stuff will then happen at the beginning of next week. But I at least want to do this because this is where we're going to put it all together. So we've done 3 steps here, just to review here what we're doing. We are whenever something is being bought, we know that there has to be a preference for that product. Cans, as much as you like those fig bars, I think you're the only one that's buying them on that machine. Right? And they can be really cheap, but I don't think that enough people are buying them to really make a good go for it, no matter how cheap or. For instance, I like black licorice, dude.
Oh.
Exactly. How many people like black licorice? Not very many, which means that my love of black licorice makes my life pretty hard, right? I gotta search. Like the Australians for some reason really like it, and the Europeans really like black licorice. I don't know. I think I blame my mother and my grandmother who got me to like black licorice, and now I live in a world where it's hard to get it. You know,
No, so like,
Good and Plenty's are among, again, another one of my favorite candies. You will not find those in that vending machine. Good and Plenty's.
me and my sister, so we went to
Yeah.
Japan and stuff, like.
Do they like black licorice?
Well, I don't know,
Okay,
but,
let's go.
both times we went to Japan,
Yeah.
there's this drink that we always like, it's our favorite drink in Japan. It's like C+,
Yeah,
right? And so I was like, okay, I really want it.
Yeah.
Someone must be selling it,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And so I look online,
yeah.
right?
And the only way you get it is
Amazon.
online.
Yeah, Amazon.
And
Right?
it's really, really expensive.
Yeah, it's like $110 for a 24-pack.
Yeah.
And in
This,
Japan, they sell it for 68 cents a bottle.
so you know what? So the interesting thing here is these like, well, actually, probably more the women would notice than the fact, like those oil removal sheets, those like blue sheets.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, so they're really expensive when you buy them here. They're like what, like $3, $4, $5 a thing. You can buy them on eBay, the Japanese version of the Clear and Clean or whatever. It's the Japanese version on eBay for like half the price, and it's the exact same blue, like the name brand one, for half the price in Japan. So either Japanese women are willing to pay a lot less for oil-free skin and they price it differently in Japan, or maybe Americans are suckers and.
Yeah, no, because everything in Japan is so much cheaper to buy. Like, so yeah, they have a desk store where everything is $1.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I spent like $80 there.
See what 80 things.
Like maybe I bought so much stuff I could buy $50.
Isn't that because of that currency, like understanding?
That's true. Yeah, so you actually probably you could buy more at the place of here than in Japan.
Well, no, because I got more money when I changed Japan.
Right, you got more money when you exchange yen, rather than the other way around.
Yeah, so I bought more stuff in Japan than I did.
Correct.
So that's where like I bought all my presents for my managers at that dollar store.
That's how much I like you. You're the $1 or 120 yen. What is it? Is it 120 yen? No, it's 100. Is it 100 yen? 110 yen?
It's 100 yen,
100 yen.
which is like less than $1.
It's true. Yeah. Okay, so here is my indifference curve, which is reflecting my preferences. If you were taking notes, I'm going to pause right here so that you can get a series of 3 pictures here. This would be the first picture you would take if you're taking a picture and you're thinking about taking a picture. So this is what we spent all the way till the break talking about, was this indifference curve, right? So we talked about all the characteristics of this indifference curve, right? We talked about what the slope is, why is it shaped that way, what does it mean, how does it look when there's one above it, one below it, why can't they intersect? We talked about all of the notions of preferences. And it was a lot more interesting than just talking about the budget constraint, but the idea was the income restriction could be this. Let's see, I got There's only one budget constraint, referring to the fact that I only have so much income. This is our second step. So I did it kind of quickly here because honestly, it's not that interesting. But we talked about what is the slope of it, why the intercepts what they are, and how does it look a little different when we alter the price of the products. Okay, so now in step 3, obviously your eyes should be attracted to something here. Exactly, where the two just touch each other. Now, let me ask you this. Why, so this would be your third picture. Why, I'll stay out of the picture. Let's go back to my description again. All bundles have to have relationships to each other, and this is also true with consumer choices. So, why is D not the optimal choice? So let's look at here, consumer choice. Condition number 1 has to be on the budget line itself, meaning another way of terming number 1 here is it has to be affordable. And D is not affordable. Now, what's the problem with C and B? C and B are both affordable, but no, you don't. So A, C, and B all cost the same amount of money. Exactly. On B and C, they're on a lower indifference curve. B and C are on this yet to be labeled lower indifference curve, U0. Meaning that my goal is to be on the highest indifference curve just tangent to the budget constraint. That is my goal. When you watch a show like Hoarders, right? If anyone's ever watched this, right? Again, it's a person that obviously has some. You can either say they have a troubling issue, or I think sometimes though, what is going on in their mind is perfectly rational. It just seems screwed up to us because we are, right? And I think it's a little bit presumptuous of us to say that they're the screwed up ones and we're the normal ones. When we're probably all screwed up in our own ways, right? Says the guy with a lot of calculators. All right, I mean, but the idea here is that the problem with B and C is that they're spending the same amount of money as if they were at A. But the reason why I bring up that Hoarders thing is that the problem with B compared to A is that in some sense they're consuming too much coffee. And they can't get away from that product. And if they could have so many more Skittles if they could just stop consuming so much of it. So B, replace coffee with Juul, right? Juul, not the singer, Juul, the vaping thing, right? Right, which I don't care what it says, it's gotta be addictive because, dude, it takes nicotine. As a former smoker, I can't imagine something containing nicotine and not being addictive in some way. And the only cool thing about selling an addictive product is that it causes things like B or D, depending on where your product is, right? Can you get addicted to Skittles? Yeah, sure, hell can, right? It's exciting, right? Can you get addicted to coffee? Yeah, absolutely can as well, right? Can you get addicted to McDonald's? Can you get, right? Whatever the product is, there's probably some way. Now, not only addictive, right? But think about this app issue again, right? There's probably a rewards program at Starbucks, right? Yeah. Well, exactly. What does that force people to do, right? I need only 200 more points to get a free scone, right? A free coffee, right? Right, causing me to consume more than I otherwise would, which is the whole point of, right? Starbucks doesn't care if I'm happy. They don't want to be happy, right? They don't care about me. I mean, they don't want to be unhappy, but they don't necessarily. I'm still happy at B compared to A. But if we were to ask the person who hangs out at Starbucks too much, dude, did you know the real world exists out there? right? I can find some way to get them to experience the real world. It might actually be happier. I'm going to pick it up from that slide. Then. I'm going to pick it up from slide 22. But the reason why this is important is because we're going to use this to then derive the demand curve. So we're going to use this to then derive the demand curve. Okay. Go off into the world. We're going to stop at slide 21 and pick it up with slide 22. Which again, you know, this is all recorded, but I don't see how you get the same thing from that coming here. So.
Yeah.
And so C and B are just not your optimal base. Your optimal.
C and B are not optimal. You are spending all of your income, but you are not. But you're not as happy. Yeah.
Wait, Shiny.
Yeah.
What's your owl thing?
What do you mean?
Like,
This thing? Yeah, it's actually called Owl.
You gotta get the session ID number.
Oh, you don't have to worry about that stuff. There is the ID number, so like if you know you're not gonna be here, I'm gonna start to post the meeting code since this is kind of our first one doing this. I'll start to post the meeting code. But if you're coming to class, the videos will be posted. So either way that you do it, either you can watch the video after the fact, or if you're just saying, I want to be there and want to chat if I have to, but I'll just want to do this from home. You can either email me beforehand, or we can, I'm going to set up the same meeting code so that every week is just a continuation of that same meeting.
But is it posted on your YouTube? Or no?
The video or the PowerPoint?
Your video.
It'll be posted. It's going to finish its processing. It'll probably be finished with it tonight, and so then I will post it. Probably have it posted tomorrow. And it's always going to have the same meeting, I guess, but it will be. How do I stop this? Yeah, it'll be posted onto YouTube though. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll be posted. It will be posted. See, stop recording. Yes.